Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. My guest is going to talk about not only surviving a grief episode, but what she's doing with musical and crystalline, I think it's called crystalline music and so on. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and telling our listeners a bit about you.
Thank you, Christine, for inviting me. I'm Jeraylyn Glass. I've been a professional singer and musician from the time I'm 19. I was blessed to have a long life and career in music, and I never had a plan B. I never had anything else that I really did. So my life has been really immersed in music. And I started on Broadway when I was 19. I was the youngest in the cast. I played Rex Harrison's Upstairs Maid in the 25th anniversary revival of My Fair Lady. And I did a production of Jesus Christ Superstar. I sang Mary Magdalene, and I was in a national tour of Showboat. And then my career led me into classical music. And I ended up moving to Europe, where I lived for 20 years. I had a wonderful career there doing concerts and opera. I started a children's foundation in Munich called Kids for Kids World Foundation. And the idea was I wanted to be of service in a foreign country. Yeah. And music was the language that is universal for everybody. Everybody can understand the language of music, whether you understand the words of a song or a piece or not. Yep. And the idea of that Kids Foundation was that we created original musical productions for the participating children and young people. And then the money that we raised, which was about $35,000 every year, went to a music therapy program that we started. Just, health insurance doesn't really cover that. We're getting to that place in the United States, but where children who had lost parents or parents who had lost children or whatever it was, music therapy was offered to the children and their families in Germany. So that was something that I did for many years too. And, and then 9 years ago, my own son died. And, as you know so very well, it's not the normal course of life. And, people would say, gee, when you lose a parent, you lose your past. And when you lose a partner, you lose your present. But when you lose a child, you lose your future. And, people would say things like, you'll never get over it. So just prepare yourself. And, my son and myself, we were so close in life. And he was a musician also. He played the piano, he sang, and he played the guitar. And when he was 13, he was a part of the Kids Foundation. A lot of the children in the Kids Foundation would enter a contest in Germany called Jugendmusiziert. And it was a contest that encouraged music in the youth. And in the particular year that he entered, the category was musical theater. So he had 5 songs and a choreography and a monologue. And one of his best songs that he loved was It Don't Mean a Thing If It Ain't Got That Swing by Duke Ellington. Yep, and he put a nice high B flat on the end, and it was, very fun. But the week before his semifinal audition, he was like, Mom, something's happened to my voice. And he started his voice change. I'm also a professor of singing, and I had never taken a young man through their voice change. Okay. And so we used these singing bowls. So I had found the crystal singing bowls 18 years ago, and I loved them. I heard them, and they were like, this beautiful sound you can hear. It was just like a very pure, pristine sound. And so I bought a set of 7, and I brought them back to Germany. I used them with my students. I used them with friends and family, and my little boy loved them. So, and when he was 7, he'd always say, Mommy, bring me to bed with my sound blanket and give me my tummy tickles. We'd put the bowl on his belly. So when he had his voice changed, we used the singing bowls, and his voice stayed open. And I had him do different kinds of exercises. And when he stood up to do his contest, Christine, he said, hello, my name is Dylan. And since 1 week, I'm no longer soprano. And everybody roared. And I watched this kid, just at a time when he could be so vulnerable. I watched him stand in his confidence and express himself. And so that was my first big experience. I wouldn't have called it sound healing at the time, but I watched how the singing bowls helped him. Then I had a student who was 16. She was also a part of the Kids for Kids World Foundation, and she was having some problems coming up into her higher register. So I asked her to choose a bowl, and she's, I asked her, it was actually this note. And I asked her to go like, ah, so to just match her voice with the bowl sound, and then to move it, ah, to make sounds with the bowl. What happened, Christine, was the blockage opened, and she was suddenly able to go up into her higher register. And then she said to me, Jeraylyn, I just had a memory. And something that was traumatic from her childhood arose from the sound of the bowl and her voice and training with it. So her and my son were the first two experiences I had with the crystal singing bowls being a modality that could help move blockages, could help bring your confidence. Me, myself, as a singer, because I had sung, I started when I was 11. And by the way, my singing teacher is 102 years old now. Oh. And it's mind-blowing to just see that when you're really infused in music like she has been, like it can bring so much positivity to our lives, right? But I always knew as a singer that I was a crystalline instrument. I was an instrument that I had these two tiny vocal cords, and I had to train my body to be a vocal athlete, had to train breath control, etc., so that I could project that voice in sometimes a 3,000 seat theater over a 100-piece orchestra, right?
Right.
So I just say that what I became super passionate about as after my son died, and obviously, it's a process. It's taken a number of years, but was to help people to recognize each of us is our own unique instrument, right? And each of us has our own one-of-a-kind timbre and vocal signature, right? And if we can feel that and discover it and express it, we can bring our body into health and harmony and wholeness. And that's what I discovered for myself working through the grief of losing my son. And then as I began to help people, I helped cancer patients and hospice patients and their families, and veterans with PTSD, Parkinson's patients, children, and just regular people that, we get totally stressed and we go into fight or flight. We produce too much cortisol. We worry about this. We're fearful about this. We're concerned about that. But how sound and music, which I knew so well from my childhood and then from my whole profession, could be that medium that could help to calm the mind, bring us into a place of complete stillness. And in that stillness, you can drop inside yourself and feel there is healing possible. When we were talking before, you were mentioning, like, we have one hospice doctor here in Southern California, and he's very, very well known and very well loved, who says there may be things that there is no cure for, right? But everybody can heal. What you were sharing with me, that we can help someone to find dignity, to find grace, to find strength, to find the light and this bigger purpose, that we're not a victim of the things that happen in our lives. They happen to strengthen us. Sometimes I would go, oh, God, I didn't sign any contract that my son would go before me. No, I don't believe in that. And I'll tease my son and say, if I did sign that contract, when I see you again, we're going to have a talk about it. But it's like, there can be such humor now, because I recognize there is definitely a much bigger picture of why we're here in this human suit, for the time period that we are. And just like you, I'm so blown away by your story and what you've created with the grief and the sadness in your life. Like, you just want to say, okay, everybody, I'm not going to be a victim of these circumstances. And I know that I'm a spark and I'm a light. And I know that I have a purpose bigger than the circumstances that have happened to me in my life. Yeah. And I think that was a long-winded intro that you asked me for, but that's kind of the shape of it.
That's great. I fully agree. Yeah, we can take those negative experiences and make them into something more positive, whatever that might be. And Yeah. So it's definitely part of what I say a lot of too. So you kind of figured out that this was kind of a healing mechanism because of the grief with your son and then this other student and so on. So do you have like a business where people come to see you like they would a therapist, or how does that work?
Sure. So, I mean, it's been a longer process. Again, it was 9 years ago. And on the night that he died, I walked down to the beach just try to be in nature and find some sense of comfort, which, is pretty much impossible. You're in shock, and it's a reality that boom, from one second to the next, someone you love is no longer here in physical form. But he communicated to me that night that he died. I saw a huge shooting star, which I've never seen. I grew up in Los Angeles. I've never seen a shooting star in the city. And it was like, I could see a big arc, and I could hear this of the sound of the star. It was just like, wait, what? And then I heard his voice, Mom, it's like we always talked about. I'm home. I'm with God. And it was like, wait. Like, I heard it through my right ear, and it was his voice, and it was very apparent. But that evening began this communication through sound vibration that took me eventually back to the bowls. So I still had the set of 7 bowls that he had played as a child and that we had used for his voice change. But it wasn't till 3 months after he died that he was like, Mom, we're going to use the bowls. We're going to do sound healing. And it's like, wait, what? Like, leave me alone, son. I'm grieving you, right? But he was communicating with me pretty regularly through sound. I could always hear him through my right ear for whatever reason on the right side. And it guided me to then take the bowls out again and start to play them. And
Right.
then he was like, Mom, call the bowl dudes, because he knew about where I got the bowls and stuff. And I called the company, and I said, this is what happened. My son has passed away, and I'm going to do sound healing, and at that point in time, again, when I first heard the bowls, they were an instrument, and they were like a beautiful instrument, but sound per se really healing, or what we're calling now music medicine, which has really become a fach. It's really become an area where, music is being used in the hospitals. What I'm doing with the cancer patients, what I'm doing with hospice patients, what I'm doing with the veterans. And there's so much integration of music truly as a medicine from the study of music therapists that has been around for many years. And we're finding that, if a patient has music in the hospital, for example, what's so interesting is it's not Vivaldi, or it's not Bach, or it's not a certain kind of classical music.
Right.
No, it's music you love. You love to listen to Pharrell's Happy. That's what we got to play when you go into your operation, right? Yep. So it's what I love to share with people is that it's so personal.
Yeah.
And yet the bowls, which I am excited to play for everybody, but the bowls they're single instruments with lots of harmonics on them. Right. So what I recognized when I first heard it was like, boom, that's music. But at the same time, it wasn't really music, but it was. And in that moment, it stilled my mind, it quieted my mind, and I came to feel like this sense of love and presence and a feeling of safety in my own body. And it was like, these are so beautiful. Yeah. As I began to work with my own grief and I started to play the bowls, the first bowl that I played was a selenite alchemy, and selenite has to do with grounded white light. And as I started to play that bowl, I started to keen and groan and make sounds to express the grief that I could not make in the talk therapy. And I think that's the bigger picture for all of us with music as medicine, is that music can hold a safe space for us, and music can give us a container to breathe and feel what we say. Oh, no, that's unfeelable. When you experience grief in your life and your listeners, it's like, I don't think so. I don't know how to do that. Nothing in my life, I recognize nothing in my life had prepared me for the moment where I would meet death with my own child. Like, nothing prepares you for that, right? And so there's no words. And yet music has this capability of holding us in safety. So at the beginning, I started to play for the cancer support community, which is a nonprofit across the world, actually. And so I was going to them and giving them sound baths. Same thing with hospice patients, same thing with veterans. I'm not really doing one-on-ones in the studio. Sometimes I do, but it worked in a whole different way than I could have even anticipated. I was more or less going out of the studio and giving sound healing experiences. And then the beginning, I started to play for some of the leaders in science and spirituality, Greg Braden, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Joe Dispenza, Anita Morjani, Dr. Sue Mortar, and play events for them in bigger arenas, sometimes with 1,200 people, playing the bowls, singing, doing concerts for them, but bringing them this kind of music that quiets the mind.
Yes. Two things come up for me in what you were just talking about. I used to, as I mentioned before we started recording, I worked in healthcare leadership for many, many years. And one of the teams that I oversaw was the palliative care team, the hospice care team in the local hospital. And I volunteered for that because at that point in time was after my son had passed away. And I really was very supportive of palliative care and hospice care and all the benefits that you can get from that. And we would have musical students who would come in and volunteer to play. And it was always, is there a song you want me to play? I said, well, ask the patient if there's something that they want you to play. And I was always, first, surprised at some of the things they'd want to hear, right? And I think, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. It didn't sound like it'd be a calming song, but if that's what they like and that's what makes them feel good, no problem. And myself, the second thing that I thought of is that I actually never really put a lot of thought into. I have a fear of medical procedures, mostly because of what happened to my son with medical injury. So when I would go in for a surgery, I would ask, can you play some music? I happen to like music from musicals. So when I had hand surgery, not a couple of years ago, for example, the doctor played Phantom of the Opera, which was fantastic. And I even said to her, I know every word to every song. And they put the oxygen mask on me. I thought, well, they don't want me to hear me sing it. Okay, that's fine. But yeah, very relaxing, take my mind away from you're about to, cut into me, whatever. I got to just relax. And the music does that. So, I always thought it was kind of like a distraction, but it is really, as you're talking about, really more of a calming, even if it's the Phantom of the Opera, very calming sort of a thing for many of us. So yeah, that's actually quite fascinating. So,
I mean, totally. You have a connection to that music. You love musical therapy. Same with me. And you hear that music and suddenly you feel just held. And it's like, it's so familiar to you and you calm down and you do not go into fight or flight and there's not an overproduction of cortisol.
Right. It's amazing. And again, for me, it's musicals, but not everybody likes the same kind of music. I get it, but still, it's just that thing for me. If I'm having a down moment, I'll usually plug in and listen to a little bit of, Les Miserables or some one that I might just love the music of that one. But nevertheless, so we are going to, as I mentioned in your podcast notes, we're going to put links so that people can find your music. I know you've got published music. And so on. I love the card deck. So if you could want to talk about that card deck you've got, that would be fantastic.
So this was the first product that we did with Hay House. It's the first of its kind Oracle deck that actually has QR codes on the card itself that lead you to the sound of the singing bowls. And I was inspired by my son. I tell the story about that in the last chapter of the book, Sacred Vibrations, of how that came to be. But, he really feels strongly that everybody should have access to this kind of crystalline sound. And so it was like, Mom, most people have some kind of mobile device and let's make a card deck with QR codes on it. So that's how that came to be. And then he encouraged me to make an app. So that we've been working on for 4 years and that's come out. It's called Source Be Inspired. And same thing. It's a platform where there's 20 visualizers on it. And the idea was to create a place, again, that he was saying, Mom, people can have it in their pocket, in their back pocket, where there's science, sound vibration, the healing power of music, there's body movement. So because embodiment is a big part of what we're doing. So for all the listeners, this for me is not about having a one-time high. It's like, how can I teach you and give you the ability to embody what the sound vibration is doing or the crystalline music, what it's doing so that you can keep up leveling. What I noticed in my own life was I really noticed I began to heal. and things that triggered me or upset me didn't come as often, or when they did, I had a different arsenal to deal with it, right? And again, back to that comment where somebody said, well, you'll never get over it, so just get used to it, that you're going to be a grieving mother all the rest of your life, was just like, no, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. There's got to be, as you find a purpose. And here's my boy, and he's at the computer with me every day. And he's guided so much of this beauty. We also created a YouTube channel that has over, I think, 200 pieces of music. There's meditations called Tune Up Tuesdays. There's 3 2-hour loops that you can listen to, and they're all for free. It was like, Mom, we have to get this into the hands of the people, into the ears of the people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I love it. I love it. So you told me you would be willing to play something for us, or to show us.
Sure. And the last thing, I don't know if you wanted me to share this now, is the book.
Oh, yes.
Sacred Vibrations, which really interesting. So on the cover, this is an image of what a crystal bowl looks like underwater. So this is an image from the scientific instrument called the seismoscope. And we're doing experiments with this, but this is an image. So if you imagine that this particular bowl is a very high note that has 22 of these antinodes around it. It's very unusual. But if you imagine that perfect sacred geometry is in the fluids of our body. So when I'm playing, if we say we're approximately 60 to 70% fluid, water, and that is the picture, the image that came from me playing a bowl in the seismoscope, imagine that is doing that in the fluids of our body, which helps really to create coherence and harmony. And, I'll talk about, as a musician and a professor, I'll talk about that, like, our health and our wholeness is because we are in tune, right? And when you experience grief, you are out of tune. When you're experiencing an illness, you're not in harmony anymore. So how does sound and music help to bring a new sense, a reactivated sense of harmony and wholeness back to the body? And it could be that it's a particular organ that's out of tune. It could be that when you're grieving, your heart is completely out of tune. But sound can help align us again. Sound can help us feel this sense of, what you were sharing, and what the music that you love to hear. When you hear famous musical songs that you love, it's just like, oh, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. So before you play, tell us, the book is Sacred Vibrations, and is it about the use of these vibrations for healing? Is that kind of what you do in the book?
Yeah, I think, the book was very, very inspired also by the journey with my son, and the communications, which, as a classical musician, eventually where I ended up, everything is very much structured. But I knew from being immersed in great music that music has this place of the ineffable that goes beyond our thoughts, right? And you can't put it into words. And so the book is really, it's about all the miracles of communication that happened with my son and myself after he passed away. It's a bit of a story of what it has been like to have spent my entire life in the field of music. So what structure did that give me, so that I can share with you? Okay, in the theory of music, we use particular intervals, which you'll hear when I play. We talk a little bit about, I explain a little bit about the difference of a pentatonic scale. What does that do? What's the difference when I'm working with notes that comprise the chakra system? There's sections that we called sound RXs. So like when I've worked with hospice patients, when I've worked with children, etc., what happened? And many of our practitioners or students around the world also contributed stories of what's happened when they worked, let's say, with an autistic child, or with a veteran, a blind veteran, for example, or even one of the students has worked with healing the land. So there's those in the book too. Then there's contributions from some of the leading scientists in the field. So it's a real mix of, well, what is this new thing, the crystal alchemy singing bowls? Is there any science behind that? What's the history of sound healing, like that it's been used in every culture since the beginning of time. But the interesting thing that these instruments are only 24 years old. So we know some things about the Himalayan singing bowls, the metal singing bowls, and that tradition, but these are new. And what does it mean to have alchemy? And then there's a story about Jhené Aiko, who's a wonderful contemporary singer that's bringing this music to millions of people around the world. How her and I started to work together, and how you choose bowls, how you're asking before, do I give people treatments? All that kind of stuff is in the book. I teach over 120 hours of training so that I'm very serious about it. It's not a woo-woo thing. And because being a classical musician so long, it's like, okay, here's the structure and let me explain it to you. So there's that in that, and just inspirational stories of what has happened for many people working with the sound.
Awesome. I look forward to reading it. So
yeah. And then the last chapter really talks about, it's a question which I think we can really explore too, is what's the future of this? What is this new area called music as medicine? And as well as I, and I'm sure all the listeners know, that there's so many things that happen in our lives where there's no pill we can take. Mm-hmm. There's no protocol of what we can do to heal, right? And so how can sound be that medicine? Not that I can yet say to you, okay, take an amethyst C-note bowl and that's going to help this particular ailment. What we talked about earlier, music is so personal that you love this song, you love, Think of Me, right? And you hear that song from Phantom of the Opera and you go, somebody else, it might be Fly Me to the Moon. Somebody else, it might be the Ninth Symphony of Beethoven.
Yep.
There's no right or wrong.
Yep.
So,
no, I totally get you. I get it at all. I think for me too, music kind of can take me back, memories like smell and think. Music does the same thing. I know, with where you'll hear a song and it takes you back to whatever it is that song, reminds you of, and so on. So for instance, if I ever hear any of the music that was played at my son's funeral, for example, I always just in my tracks and I think about it and kind of do some reflection. I also happen, my son doesn't speak to me. Of course, he never was able to speak, but I get signs from him quite frequently on different things where I think, okay, I'm obviously supposed to be doing this, or I should be doing that, or so on. So I love that I have that guidance as well. Yeah, and I also the morning that my son passed away, I had the honor to be there when that happened, and felt in his spirit go right on through me as he left this space, which was insanely important to me, but also just so amazing. So yeah, just some of the experiences we get where people don't believe that someone can be communicating with us from wherever they are. I would say you're wrong. So maybe you're not listening if they're not communicating with you, but I'm telling you what, they do.
Yeah. And I share a number of those stories, and there's a beautiful film that at the end of the book, we use another QR code on page 233. There's a film that you get to see all the pictures that are in the book in black and white in color. And I explain and share. So it's like, they're unmistakable. I mean, this is what happened with Dr. Sue Morter. She's holding his picture.
Okay.
Here at the top of Juana Pichu, and there's an unmistakable beam of light. So in the little video, we show the actual video of this as the beam of light came in. I mean, it's undeniable, right? So, and like what you just said, I want people to be aware that this is available for all of us. Mm-hmm. And, again, if I found that when I was sunk in grief, I couldn't reach my son, but if I allowed a tiny opening of hope and allowed this opening of me to connect to the light, I could find him again. Yeah. And, there was a fear that would happen when I would be so sunk in grief that there was no way to connect with him. I began to learn, I have to keep my personal vibration higher. I have to keep myself in a more hopeful, in a more open place. And if I sink too long in grief, I can't find him.
Oh, wow.
That was so interesting to me. And what you said about your son, I mean, oh my gosh, those moments where you can have a completion. Like in the book, I do write a little bit about actually, and it was really, really hard. And I wasn't sure I wanted to put this in the book. And I talked with Hay House about it, but I didn't find that there were so many places where we could talk safely about death. And so I talk about what it was like to hold him, to experience, because I was terrified to see his body, right? I mean, it's different when it's perhaps your grandparents, but even then, death is something that we don't really get prepared for in our lives unless you're working in that kind of field, right? And, like when you said the connection with your son, then I want to say to you and to others, like, okay, so when you feel that, how do you embody that so it becomes a part of you?
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a one-off that it's like, oh, wow, this happened. But once again, that you're building this bridge with him.
Right.
And the bridge is that love is eternal and you are connected forever.
Yep. Yeah.
And
no, for sure. I know. For me, again, my son didn't ever speak, but he responded to the color yellow, which for whatever reason, I mean, anything yellow would make him smile and giggle and just be happy. So most of the signs I receive from him will come in the form of yellow. So either Coldplay's Yellow will come on the radio just at a time, or I'll find myself, I'll come out of a shopping store and I'm literally surrounded by 4 or 5 yellow cars and think, okay, this is really random. So something, or, yellow flowers, whatever it might be, just the color yellow is always my Ian color. So, I know that's how he's telling me something. And oftentimes it's if I'm not having the best of days. So I think I do get mired down in kind of either it's, I don't know, the daily life or whatever it might be, where I get those signs and I'm like, okay, time to back up and just, get away from that, stop that, turn that off, whatever it might be, and do something else. So yeah, I really enjoy getting those messages, I have to say.
Yellow is the color of the solar plexus. So if we talk about the chakra system, which is not, there's so much in that ancient study of the chakra system, but yellow is the solar plexus. It's your personal power, your strength of will, your self-esteem. It's him showing up and just going, Mom, is how I feel that,
Yeah, no, it's I've definitely, and I've had experiences where yellow comes up in the strangest of places. I had a podcast I did with a lady who was talking about forgiveness, and she uses visualization, and she made the comment, and it's just totally random. She said, it's kind of like if your heart is black and you'd like to see it yellow. And I thought, what did you just say? Because that was really weird. Why wouldn't you say red or yellow? It was just one of those things where I thought, oh, actually gives me goosebumps again, just telling that story today. But yeah, it was one of those like, okay, all right, obviously there's a message in here somewhere that I'm need to be open to, pick it up. So yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to play for you a set it's in the key of C. So technically that key is very much about grounding. And because you'll hear that there's low notes, there's medium notes, and there's high notes. So what that does is it helps to ground us and keep us very stable. It helps to center us and bring us home inside our body, sometimes in a place where we go, no, I don't want to be in there. It hurts too much. Mm-hmm. And what I'm going to suggest is that the sound can really hold us and help you to just be comfortable in something that might be very uncomfortable. And then you'll hear high notes that will connect us to the light that we are. Connect us to what's beyond this human form. What's there in the celestial realms, right, in the angelic realms? What's there with God? How do we relate to that? So that's part of what you'll hear and feel. And I'm going to invite everybody to, if you can, to close your eyes and to just allow your breath to be deep and long so that your breath slows down. Because by slowing down the rhythm of our breath, we help to slow down our thinking mind. And then we'll take a little sound journey with the Crystal Alchemy singing bowls.
I'm going to turn my camera off so it's just you on screen.
Allowing yourself to breathe long, deep, cleansing breaths. Gently closing your eyes. And taking this time for you to be intimate with the sacred sounds. To become more and more comfortable with that still place inside. Knowing that in that stillness, unlimited possibilities are being nurtured, awakened. breath to be deep. And to receive relaxation, allowing and letting go. The power of the Dead Sea salt to cleanse and clear at a very profound level. And Saint Germain to transmute. Clarity and an upliftment. I invite you now to set an intention as you create a new internal space. Beginning anew, beginning again. Welcoming in a new cycle. Consciously, lovingly. Long, deep breath deep in your belly. Making space. Crystalline sound could truly help bring us back to a state of being in joy in spite of any of the things that have happened for all of us in our lives. I wish you all peace. I wish you a strong sense of connection to the earth and an openness to what is possible, to connect to the invisible. Yeah. Music and sound have the ability to activate love in our hearts and to open us to more and more light and possibilities. Thank you, Christina, for having me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you being on my program. And again, we'll put links on our podcast when yours airs so people can find you, your music, your card deck, your book, all that wonderful stuff. But this has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.